Thanks very much, Cathaoirleach. First of all, I'd like to commend Dr. Niall Muldoon and his team, and also welcome him. He's here this evening to the public gallery. This is a really important report, and it paints, unfortunately, a very depressing childhood for the 5,000 plus children who are living in direct provision hotels and emergency reception centres in Ireland right now. And I know that I would very much share the concerns that are raised in this report, and that we also would know ourselves from our own kind of constituency work about some of the issues and the difficulties. And I believe that the issues were so serious that it is good that we have the opportunity to discuss it here. And I'd also like to thank Deputy Pringle for using his time to sponsor the report. The Children's Committee also this week published a report on the challenge the recent increase in the number of people coming to Ireland seeking protection is presenting. The report clearly shows, and the state accepts, that there are serious shortcomings in the delivery of essential services for children, the operation of safeguarding and welfare checks for children seeking international protection. I think we really need to just stop and actually think about that for a second, because we're actually talking about children here, and we know that we're failing, and we already have such a very poor history in this country of how we've treated children in the past, yet we seem to just be repeating that very depressing and disgraceful history. Both IPAS and TUSLA accepted the recommendations of the Ombudsman report in 2021, and despite the government committing to end direct provision in a white paper of the same year, there continues to be a growing number of international protection children in temporary accommodation that is inadequate to provide the necessary safeguarding and welfare for them. The report condemns the use of commercial hotels, in particular for housing both international protection applicants and people coming from the Ukraine in relation to the temporary protection. They are widely considered unsuitable for children due to the lack of safeguarding available. However, currently over half of all the children that are international protection applicants are living in commercial hotels. There's also no regulations in place for the inspection of accommodation for international protection applicants. HICWA I think has quite a limited role. Furthermore, TUSLA reports that there is concerns over there being no requirement to demonstrate that their child safeguarding statements are being upheld by providers of emergency accommodation. Effectively, emergency accommodations catering to children are, and of themselves, not suitable, are subject to limited independent inspections and are self-policing in their provision of child safeguarding, which is, it's actually incredible to think that we're allowing a situation like that to develop in 2023. On top of this, the report also highlights the limited ability of IPAS to carry out the required assessment of accommodation for children in line with the Reception Directive and Regulation. Recent media reports highlighted that only 574 assessments were undertaken in 2021 and 600 up to September 2022. The department then, in its wisdom, decided centres would provide the assessments in the form of a questionnaire to international protection applicants, and that these questionnaires were only voluntary. The Irish Refugee Council roundly criticised this process for the lack of information provided to international protection applicants and for the lack of involvement of social care professionals. 464 vulnerability assessments were carried out through to May of this year, which covers 1 in 10 child international protection applicants. So 50% were subsequently referred to social workers. From these figures, there can be no doubt that a large number of children in the international protection system are not getting the care they need and are entitled to. And we really just cannot allow this situation to continue. The general planning failure springs from the government white paper that proposed the abolition of direct provision, a goal that they are now reviewing on the realisation that it's unable to be delivered right now. The white paper failed to accurately anticipate the demand for international protection, and whilst I appreciate the war in Ukraine has presented significant challenges, we are not meeting our moral and legal obligations in relation to the protection of children, and we're nearly 2 years into that situation as well, so we can't keep saying it's an emergency or an unexpected situation. At this point, we have to be forward planning. Children are bearing the brunt of the government's failures. The housing support organisation Threshold report that children in emergency accommodation suffer from poor mental health, struggle to build and maintain relationships with peers, have poor physical health and increased difficulty in education. Clearly, these arrangements have a detrimental effect on children already forced to travel thousands of miles in uncertainty and fear. The provision of services for children in direct provision should not be considered an emergency or crisis, nor should it be seen as a burden. Compared to the vast majority of countries in the world, we are a wealthy country and should play our part. Remember, in a time when we ourselves were grateful for the shelter provided to those who have gone before us who fled famine and persecution at home. As a society, we must ask ourselves how seriously we consider the needs of vulnerable children. It is not good enough to simply house children in inadequate settings and pretend that they are being provided for. We must find a better way to provide resources so that these children can attain an education, build up social connections and enjoy a happy childhood, which is the entitlement of every child on this island. Under the current system implemented by the government, through the failure to adequately plan and deal with the issue, one would have to ask, in 30 or 40 years' time, will the treatment of those, especially children in direct provision and emergency accommodation, be another stain on the country's treatment of vulnerable people? And just before concluding, I do want to mention two situations. We're talking about children and vulnerable children, and I do want to just mention all of the children that in Palestine at the moment that are being slaughtered, and the situation that's so grave for children there, and the amount of displacement and everything that we're going to see for children there. I think it's important that we remember them and that we highlight that at every opportunity that we have. And then separately, the Children's Ombudsman Office were into the AV room this week in relation to children's mental health, and that is also a very, very important issue, and they highlighted some very serious concerns, but also some really good suggestions on how we can actually tackle a lot of these issues. And I said it at the briefing, and I'll say it again, we are extremely lucky to have the quality and calibre of Dr. Niall Muldoon and his team advocating and standing up for children, and we really need to listen to what they're doing. And while I'm sure they appreciate the words in here, I'm sure what they really want to see is action, and I think it's about time we do that for our children. I'm conscious that it's a Thursday evening, again a topic that affects children. I'm always saying it in here, the topics that affect women and children are always pushed to the end of the agenda. We see it consistently, and we're seeing it again this week. Thanks, Caoirleach.